Promote a culture of inclusion, supercharge your communication, and unleash the full potential of your teams and leaders with the Inclusive Handbook collection from the Diversity Movement. As part of the collection, I wrote the Inclusive Leadership Handbook with Kurt Merriweather to empower leaders with tools needed to cultivate a culture that fosters creativity, innovation, and employee engagement. Through strategies, exercises, and self-reflection, leaders at all levels can enhance their effectiveness. Learn more at thediversitymovement.com/store. Use code HOL at checkout for 25% of your first order. Do you want to build your brand by being a guest on industry-leading podcasts? If you're a business leader, an author, or a speaker, my guess is that you do. Picture this. You, a dynamic executive easily connecting with engaged audiences, turbocharging your top-of-funnel marketing, and creating a treasure trove of content with every episode. Podcasting is a game changer that you've been waiting for. And podcastally.com is your VIP ticket to podcast PR success. Say goodbye to the ordinary and hello to the extraordinary exposure. Let the Podcast Ally team connect you with the best-in-class podcast for you to be a guest on. Head over to podcastally.com and use the promo code DT for a 10% discount on Podcast Ally services. That's podcastally.com, promo code DT. Welcome to High Octane Leadership with Donald Thompson. This season, we're diving deeper with more solo episodes, where I'll share the experiences that have led to recognition by EY, Forbes, Fast Company, and others. Not as a boast, but as milestones on my entrepreneurial path. From growing multi-million-dollar firms to successful business exits and building high-performance teams with a global perspective. I'll reveal the insights and strategies from my journey and share them with you so that we can win together. Alongside these solo episodes, we'll have industry visionaries and thought leaders, and we'll explore effective leadership. Ready to empower your leadership journey with real success stories? Let's embark on this transformational journey together. We're going to talk about today, as the title alludes, right, strategic storytelling in the world that's being transformed by AI and all kinds of different transformational things that are going on out there. And one of the things that we will hone in on is what pierces the noise, right? What still connects with people and gets through. When we think about public relations and marketing professionals and PR professionals, one of the things I like to boil it down to, right, is how do we gain, right, attention? How do we keep attention? And then how do we move behavior, right? Because I'm a very, I speak in simple terms, if that makes sense. There's a lot of big words that people use to describe things, but I try to keep them at a level that I can understand with pace. And so one of the things that I'll do is I'll tell you a little story. And so with the diversity, equity, inclusion, one of the things that I'm thankful and that I get a lot is I get a lot of feedback. Some of it's super positive and some of it not so much, right? There are folks out there that don't necessarily believe in what we do, why we do it, why it matters, what the impact is. And I'm always grateful, however, for folks that verbalize it, because communication that's verbalized, critique that's verbalized, means you can do something with it, right? You can choose to ignore it, right, if it doesn't make any difference, or you can kind of venture, right, to move people from critical to curious to maybe someday committed to something that's good. And so I'll give an example. If you think about 2020 and one of the catalytic events, right, that created this new wave of DEI movement and momentum, and it came from a series of tragic events. The murder of Breonna Taylor, the murder of George Floyd, right? 9 minutes and 29 seconds. And how quickly we forget the events that led to it. And when people are now wanting to make DEI about woke narrative and different things, here's the point in the story that I'll tell you. I was talking with someone that with tempo, if somebody disagrees with me passionately, I describe that they're talking to me with a lot of tempo. And this gentleman had a lot of tempo. And we were having a conversation in and around this time. This was a few years back. And he said, I don't understand all this Black Lives Matter stuff. I don't understand this defund the police stuff, right? Police are there to protect and serve, and I've never had a problem with the police. okay. Your personal experience doesn't dictate my environment, my experience. I said, can I tell you from my perspective what some of these things mean that are happening in our environment? And I asked permission, even though it was a high octane conversation, I just gently asked permission. Most people to their core are good people. And this is the premise that I approach communication, leadership, business, management, the whole deal. I do not go into situations believing that the person I'm talking to is a bad actor. They may have bad information. They may be having a bad day. Something may have hit them in a wrong way. But I don't perceive them as a bad actor until they demonstrate on multiple occasions. So I asked permission of this individual, can I share something from my perspective? And he said, yes. And this was a group setting, but it was a small executive briefing group. So it was about 10 people there, right? And I said, my number is 7. And now he stepped back and he's like, okay, this sounds weird. And I said, you described not having any negative experience with the police. My number as an African-American male is 7. And so I'm going to tell you a quick story in just a moment, right, about coming home from a business trip in Boston, from Boston to North Carolina, was living in Raleigh at the time. The flight landed, and I remember this vividly because it's one of my 7. And so I remember flying into RDU, going and picking up my car. It wasn't at one of the lots that was close. I had to get on the bus, and I had to move on the bus to one of the lots that's like used to be, this is how long ago this story was, used to be $4 or $5 a day, right? And so I get my car and I head home, and I end up getting back to my home at about 11:15. Again, I remember these details because it's one of my 7. And after about 15 minutes of just changing and just getting settled, there's a knock on the door, but it isn't a how you doing knock. It's a super aggressive knock on the door. And so I have on some boxer shorts and some different things. So I go down and run down to the door, and I'm like, what's going on? And all I see are several cars with lights on them, blue lights, and men outside with hands on their hip. And they weren't doing the latest TikTok dance. And so I opened the door, and they said, are you Donald Thompson? And I said, yes. It's like, well, you are under arrest. And I was like, what the f-? There's guys outside, and there's several officers. And then the one standing there, right, I could tell, because it's one of my 7, it was not, his hand was on the weapon. And I said, before I take a step and before you do anything, you got to tell me what's going on before I move or you move. We have a warrant for your arrest for threatening bodily harm to someone else. And I said, it wasn't me. And I looked at him in his eyes, and he said, I don't care what you think. And then he used a lot of different vocabulary words that start with N. And then because his tempo went up, guess what his friends, their tempo went up, and I'm standing here, and now their guns drawn on me, and all I did was ask, what is going on? I looked this officer in the eye, and one of them's getting handcuffs ready and different things, and I said, if you put those bracelets on me and in this car, this mistake will be tremendously different for all of us. I need you to look in my eyes and understand that you have the wrong person in the situation. For whatever reason, I don't know if you're super spiritual, I am, but he listened and paused and just took a step back and did a little walkie-talkie, and he said, can I use your telephone? I was like, you can do anything you want, as long as you don't put me in that car and you tell them people to put them weapons back in their holster, and then we'll be cool. He goes, pick up the phone. My son, who at the time was 2 years old, it's David Thompson. They got David Thompson messed up with Donald Thompson and came to my door with all of this heat. My reason for telling you this story, and I'm leaving out a lot of detail, okay? I want you to understand I'm leaving out a lot of detail. When I told this story in that moment, I said, can you at least understand, John, why me and my father and my son have a different perspective on the police than you do? Because we all have a number. And he said, I never thought about it like that. The reason I tell you all that story is because the gentleman had a high octane point of view. He was not listening to anyone's opinion or perspective, but a story that is authentic, that is real, pierced through the negative association that he had had in that moment, and he could hear me. I didn't attack him for his point of view. I didn't tell him how wrong he was. I asked permission if I could tell him a story. And so as we think about business and life and goals that we're trying to deliver for our clients and our customers, one of the things that's really, really important that we kind of forget in the age of all of the digital marketing and press releases and the typical standard things that we all do and engage in for our clients is, what is the powerful story that we can tell that will move the needle through the noise that we all face? And that simple question will help ground you in your business goals for you, for your client, for anything that you're doing on a communication level. Unfortunately, I had to use that, right? And if I hadn't been in, and now this is a little bit of group therapy, and then I'll get to the point. Think about this situation and me being here or not. If I didn't understand how to act appropriately with strength and confidence under duress, it could have been really weird. I could have been a statistic in another different way. But I used that storytelling in a situation that was highly serious, because if it can work there, then what can it do in our normal day-to-day work, right, of delivering messaging? Let's talk about leaders that don't understand the value of communications. And Bob Batchelor, Bob, raise your hand real quick. Bob's a good friend. Bob came on as director of communications for the diversity movement. He's since been promoted. He's now VP of brand strategy for Workplace Options, our new parent company. And so Bob is just killing the game. But here's the thing I want to tell you about Bob. He's a communication savant, 15 books. He should do comms for Bank of America. And he chose to partner with our business and help us with that very thing. How to get people to care when they don't understand. We had that same challenge in diversity, equity, inclusion. How do you get people to care when they don't understand, when they don't want something? Here's the thing with executives. Here's the thing with anyone that you're trying to move or change behavior. Most of us, think about this question, working with leaders who don't understand the value of communications. What the leader would say about us is, the reason I don't understand the value of communications is because no one's showing me an ROI I can measure. And the people that are talking to me typically don't understand how my business makes money, survives, and grows. The flip side of that question is an equally valid point of distance or differentiation. And so one of the things that I do when I'm talking with executives about marketing and communications, when I'm talking to executives about something that they may not understand, is I try to find a baseline of common ground. And it is super important in any level that you're working in business. Because if we are talking about something in common, then we're on the same side of the table. We're not adversarial. If I'm trying to convince you or change you, your natural instinct is to defend your current position. Let me give you an example. Many people in diversity, equity, inclusion use the term white privilege. How well do you think that goes over with middle-aged white men? You think they're like cheering and clapping, like, oh, I've been waiting for somebody to tell me about my privilege. Oh God, Don, thank you. And Don, because you told me about my white privilege, thank you for the emphasis on my whiteness, right? I'm going to write you a check for $250,000 so you can say this to me more. No one does that. So we had to make a business decision to talk about privilege. I grew up in a two-parent household. That's privilege. My parents moved from Bogalusa, Louisiana, deep south. If Mississippi is last in education, Louisiana is desperately trying to beat them. That was my little paper mill town. And my parents decided to move from that little paper mill town to Storrs, Connecticut, and get educated at the University of Connecticut so me and my sister could have better educational opportunities. That's privilege. If I talk about privilege, which many of us have, now we're on the same page I'm not against you. I'm talking about the responsibilities we have with our privilege. That worked a lot better. The point of commonality, the point of common ground, is business critical to every piece of communication that we're delivering. What we tend to do is we tend to allow our bias for our product, our bias for our company that we're representing, our bias in terms of the way we see the world, generate the argument that we create versus thinking about the other side of the table and the problems they need to solve. So when I'm working with marketers and communicators about how to get executives on their side, is asking questions about what are the top points of pain, what are the top points of opportunity that you have as a business executive, and then I wrap my PR and marketing strategy around those themes from a point of agreement. Cutting through the noise, we'll get to that in a minute, and too many priorities we all face as a CEO. My team will attest, Jamie, Kurt, those are in here. I am a creator of too many priorities, right? CEOs have idea of the minute syndrome, right? And it's bad, right? Like it's bad. Now, the thing that I will tell you is most business leaders are aware that they do it. And so managing multiple priorities in our job functions as communicators and marketers, we have to think about taking a blank sheet of paper, talking with our executive team, and getting them simply to write down the three biggest things that are concerned about, the three biggest things that they see as opportunities, and how my role can help you achieve those three things that are good and minimize those three things that are bad. And by having that simple conversation, you now have set a line of communication about how to professionally push back when you are getting multiple priorities at every turn. But in order to do that, we've got to become leaders in our conversations with people that may not agree with us initially. So the business landscape and the case for inclusive marketing. So I'm going to let you all read a little bit, but we're going to talk a little bit about AI versus all six. And one of the things that I've done personally and folks that I've talked to, whether it's ChatGPT or Claude or whatever system that people are into, people have a lot of different perspectives, but use the tools personally so that you can know what is valuable, what to be afraid of, and what not to be afraid of. If you just hear the vernacular in the media about AI is going to eliminate jobs, then you can automatically have a negative posture about a new tool and say, how could that affect me in a negative way? I typically like to go on offense. And so I wanted to understand if I use ChatGPT 30 minutes a day, which is kind of my average, just playing with it, just working with it, here's a couple things that I learned on offense. Number one, if someone gives you something that's average, you can tell whether it's from ChatGPT or an intern, right? So there's no magic in these tools that is going to create something that's going to eliminate the job of the excellent. It is going to put heightened pressure on people that are in the middle or starting out in their career, because it is great as a research tool. You can do a lot of informative research quickly. It's great as a mental model to start the way you would think about ideas, questions you would ask. But what it doesn't do, and this is the secret sauce to keep us all excited, competitive, motivated about the future, is it doesn't humanize content. Which means people that over-rely on a mechanical tool that is still emerging and developing are not going to have prescriptive, precise, and powerful storytelling that's going to move the needle. And so really it's a function of how AI can accelerate the basic functions of what we're trying to write, research, et cetera. And then what is the distance between the 60, 70% of content it can help develop? And how do we forge that delta with our secret sauce that takes that content and makes it meaningful, makes it memorable, and all the things that we want to do for our clients? But I would say the biggest thing I've learned how to do and train from an AI perspective is how I want feedback for the goals I have. And you have to use it consistently enough for it to be able to learn your tone of voice. And so the big thing I would give you as a takeaway is there's job that's just been created. You ever heard of the role of the AI prompt engineer? Well, there's folks in the space that are making up to $1 million a year in this newly created job. Basically, it's how to talk to this machine so that it gives you higher quality output. So let me give you a quick tip that I learned from a prompt engineer on YouTube. Because I'm not paying nobody $100,000 for no new job. I was like, got to be a better way. So I went to youtube.com and made it happen. And so this prompt engineer on YouTube, it did not cost me $1 million a year. But what he said was super compelling. Say the role you want ChatGPT to take on for you. I want you to play the role of a social media analyst, writing content for LinkedIn with an audience comprised of C-suite executives in the healthcare space. That now sets ChatGPT up for the level of specificity that you want. And now you ask the question of what you wanted to research. Now you ask the question of what you wanted to do. The thing about AI or any new technology, there are cheat codes. And since most people are talking to non-users of the technology, you're listening just to a media narrative that's not telling you how to win with the new technology. What I just described to you was a small little nugget of how to help you win with the technology, right? And all of our clients are going to ask us what our AI strategy is, right? So we need to practice, try, fail, adjust, make a few mistakes, but that's one tip that I would share with you. Another one, and I learned this the other day, and then we'll keep it moving, but super important. You can actually tell ChatGPT how you want the information structured. You can talk to it and say, on the x-axis, I want this. On the y-axis, I want this. Build me a table with a series of 10 questions for my podcast for this type of guest. And then follow on points for each question. And it'll lay it out. Should you be afraid? If you don't practice on it, you should. But if you start working with it, it is another tool in the toolbox for communicators that I think is going to be tremendous. And so I think I covered some of those. The last piece on AI, and then I'll talk about how do we counter program against people that are overusing it. Anything you do with repetition, you get better at it. Right? And so if I think about my journey in diversity, equity, inclusion and the training that we went to receive and starting a business from the ground up, 4 or 5 years in, right, I have a lot to share and knowledge and experiences. But on day one, here's what you have to realize about doing anything new. You have to be willing, right, here's how I'll say it. Anybody ever learn a new dance move and get it right the first time? You look goofy, right? You're not doing that in public. You know what I mean? Like it just looks a little goofy, right? And it just looks goofy, right? But you keep practicing and you keep practicing it. And then all of a sudden your kids see you and you're like, you got it, right? You got it. It might still be a different version of the two-step, right? But you got it because you practiced it. AI is a similar way. Practice it, play with it, work with it, and then you won't be afraid of it. You will actually be the person people come to in your organization of how to use it, leverage it, and it'll create more value for what you're doing. Storytelling. I'm using DEI as an example, but hopefully you will able to extrapolate this to things that you're doing specifically. One of the things in diversity, equity, inclusion is people are talking about this is woke language. This is creating quotas and different things, right? Great, right? I let people talk until they talk themselves out. And then when there's a moment, I say, listen, can I ask you a question? Yeah. I said, all right. This example I'm getting ready to use was an executive at a multi-billion-dollar financial services organization. I said, do you understand there's $3.6 trillion in buying power in the LGBTQ community? He said, no, I did not. I said, okay. I said, do you want that money spent in your financial institution? Yes, I would. Wouldn't it make sense for your marketing organization to then understand inclusive language so that the content you're putting out on social, the information you're putting into the scripts for the ads and the videos that you're developing are able to connect authentically with broad audiences. He said, that makes a lot of sense. He said, Don, I will tell you is that the reason that I was struggling with diversity, equity, inclusion is every meeting I went to felt like an attack on me. This was a middle-aged white C-level individual. And I said, one, that's not good. I said, and so we'll need to think about that, work on that. I said, but two, do you understand that the goal is for you to understand how to work with people better, differently, not to change you without your permission? And he said, that makes a lot of sense. He said, Don, for some reason, most people aren't telling me these things about DEI the pragmatic way that you're communicating. And I said, well, one, it's a two-way street. I said, I agree with you. I think that a lot of us in the space wear our emotions and our chip on our shoulder and different things on our sleeve, and that comes across when we're trying to teach. And messaging and marketing is about the audience, right? And so I do think we miss that sometimes. I said, but the other way to think about it is, did you ask for additional information, or did you just make an assumption what you heard that you liked or didn't like it? He said, Don, I don't like a thing you just said, but you're right. He said, and I appreciate the way that you balance the views, things that someone else could do better, things I could do better. One of the things as a communicator, and we're talking about storytelling, but storytelling isn't just from a big media standpoint. Storytelling is also about effective communication. And effective communication is easier with friends. And I want you to think about that. Effective communication is easier with friends. So I'm in the business of making friends. So just because I disagree with a friend doesn't mean we're not friends anymore. And so what I try to think about when I'm communicating with someone is, how would I tell this story to my kids? How would I tell this story to my friend, even if we strongly disagree? So let me give you another story. Early in my career in sales, I went for 20 years without ever selling to somebody in the C-suite that looked like me. When I did, I was at a business in Kentucky, and the gentleman came in the room, and I literally had to go to the restroom because I almost lost it. Because it was the first time I was doing a deal with someone that looked like me in my entire sales career. And I'd sold millions of dollars of product and software and service and been all over the world doing it. So that's the backdrop. So I'm sitting in a conference room, and I'm the junior person at this point in the conference room, right? And this is a multi-million-dollar transaction. So if you think about corporate America, like we see on TV, it was this backdrop: glass room, marble table, big fluffy chairs, like the whole stereotype thing. We were in that kind of room. And we're going back and forth on the negotiation. And one of the gentlemen in the room said, "You all are being Indian givers." I'm going to let this sit with you for a minute. And I was like, man. And I looked up, I was like, why are you doing me like this? I got to say. So now I'm trying to figure out, I'm the junior person in the room. So do I blow it up, which could adversely affect my, I'm going through all this in my head. Do I let it go? Man, I can't let that go. I'm not indigenous people, and I'm offended and pissed like God. So I remember sitting there for about a minute. And if you think about something that makes you uncomfortable in a minute, that's a long time. And then I rose my hand, which makes it kind of elementary or whatever, but there's 10, 15 executives in the room, and they all kind of looked at me because I hadn't said much in the meeting. And I smiled because I'm trying to be with friends. I didn't know it as a thing to teach then. I was just trying to learn and not get fired. I said, listen, some of you all here went to Harvard, MIT, the company was in Boston. I'm no degree DT from North Carolina, but my history doesn't say Indian giver. I think it's more like white man's giver, right? And I started smiling, and nobody smiled back. I was like, this could be going bad. So I got 12 white guys just looking at me like, and then another minute of awkward silence. And then the gentleman that made the statement said, Don, I hear what you're saying. Can we talk about this offline and circle back in this moment to figuring out these deal points? And I said, absolutely. I didn't know what we were going to talk about later. I said, fine. We ended up walking around the block, me and this individual are good friends to this day, great friends. But in moments, communication requires risk. And I'm not telling you to take the risk that I take. Maybe I should have talked to HR after the meeting. Maybe I should have done 8 number of different things. But what I decided in the silence and the sweaty armpits and the sweat running down my beads of sweat and trying to figure this out is I wouldn't be me if I just let this go. Now, how am I going to approach it? I thought about doing it after XYZ. But what I decided was I'm going to do it in a fun way and try to make my point. But I can't let this go because this is an opportunity because these 12 leaders will never forget this moment. And it'll be a story that they tell that will filter. And I decided to take that risk. And several of the folks said nothing to me after, but several of them said, you know what? I say that kind of dumb stuff all the time too. I don't mean anything by it, but thanks for calling that out loud. Because I need to think about just kind of the casual things that I say. I'm not saying I'm any kind of hero or anything like that from this instance. What I'm telling you is sometimes communication requires risk. And you have to be thoughtful in the moments that you're in and in the content you deliver. So now let's put it more in practical terms. I was working with a healthcare system and they were talking about their DEI initiative. And they put out a press release without running it by me. And they got a lot of significant backlash. So the CEO's calling me over the weekend, what do we do about this? And I said, step 1, take out the phrase white privilege. I'm going to make like, you're going to be on the news, right? And then we talked a little bit about some different things that were in there. And here's what I asked them. Who was in your review cycle to review this? And he said, well, a couple of people from marketing, I said, no. Tell me by name so I could look them up on LinkedIn while we were talking. And everybody kind of looked the same. And it didn't dawn on them of what trigger words were in there because it was not only looked the same, but there was no one in there with a serious communications/DEI background that phrase would have jumped out like a blinking light. So when we're doing storytelling, when we're doing PR and communications work, here's one of the things I recommend. Most PR agencies, most marketing agencies do not look like me. So then what do we do about having a diverse mindset within the organization when we can't change our demographics like this? You can partner. Several PR and marketing organizations use the diversity movement to help vet their content. We're not trying to take their customer. We're trying to create better workplace for all. We work with several organizations on employee communication. So our team in the diversity movement have created an employee engagement model. And I'm going to share it with you all from a PR and a marketing perspective. Because one of the missing links in diversity, equity, inclusion, creating belonging with an organization and storytelling is that we use a lot of money and expertise to outwardly propel our brands. When our strongest brand ambassadors are within the building culture company that we work, and we usually give those tasks to very junior people. What I recommend is when you're thinking about growing organizations with your partners, with your clients, and giving them new insights which clients love, is one way to underpin the brand promises that we're helping people make is to ensure that the company is living along the lines of those promises. And one of the ways is being transparent, open, and providing highly engaging communication with your team. I'll give an example. So when the Supreme Court struck down Roe v. Wade, there was a significant point of pain for many people that I know. Many people that I know and love. As a business leader thinking about communication and storytelling, here's what I had to do in that moment. I wrote a note to my team and I said, I'm still processing what's just occurred in our country. Over the next few days, I will have a point of view and share that with you all. But in this moment, I know that there are some of you that are hurting. That doesn't mean I'm making as a leader a political stance one way or the other. What it means as a leader, and what I would encourage you from a storytelling, a communication standpoint, because you all are working with leaders, is that saying nothing is the problem. Because as a leader, your goal is to show care and empathy for the people that you lead. It's no difference if there's a school shooting. It doesn't matter if you're Second Amendment, NRA officer. If you've got 500 employees, there are employees that you have that are now scared to send their kids to school. So as a leader, as a communicator, you have to let them know we have an employee assistance program that you can call if you need to talk to someone. If you need additional flexibility in what you're doing work-wise, we want to offer that to you. So in communicating in this technology-driven world, we still need to communicate from a human-centered perspective and be thoughtful to people. It never hurts you. But the thing that we have to teach executives that we all work with, expect to pay us top dollar for our services, right, is we have to bring them new and powerful insights of how they can be better at what they do. And that starts to break down that wall of misunderstanding about the value of communicators. Inclusive marketing definition. Marketing that addresses individuals from all backgrounds, demographic groups, breaks down traditional assumptions and consumers, and tells new, more accurate brand stories by increasing representation of diverse people. There are folks that have done it well, and there are folks that have done it wrong. Anybody heard the fiasco with Bud Light? They were trying to do a good thing, and it turned into a catastrophe. Now, why is it a catastrophe? Anytime you're responsible for your business losing billions of dollars in market share, you didn't do your job right. Right? And that doesn't mean I'm not for or against the message they were trying to do, but the goal is for you to grow brand awareness, grow market share for your organization. As I looked at that example, one of the things that we all as storytellers and communicators need to understand is who is our core audience, who buys from them, and what is a stair-step method to behavioral change or faking. And a lot of times what we tend to do, and I'll repeat this again, is we tend to bring ourselves to the conversation, and we tend to produce things at a high level and publish them without a good review process to at least give us a simulation of what could go right or wrong with the brand story we're trying to tell and position. Define your audience, problems or opportunities. Not always problems, could be an opportunity. And then what's our solution? How are we going to make the world better? And this is back to the earlier poll in terms of executives not understanding what we do and value. Executives are really pretty clear on their problems and their opportunities. One of the reasons that our team created the employment engagement model, Alan King, who is the CEO of Workplace Options, we were talking maybe 3-4 months ago. And he said, Don, I really would love for us to find a way that we can incorporate all the things that WPO does for the 80 million lives that we serve, what the diversity movement does in the DEI space and organizational change and leadership development, and have a single perspective that we can talk to people about with a single voice, a single brand. Me being the awesome leader that I am, I said, Jackie, Bob, Kurt, could you help solve this problem for Alan? And then I'll show him the PowerPoint. But our team went to work and thought about all the things that both companies do. And by creating this employee engagement model, now this is storytelling. Think about the executives that you work with or for and the executives, clients that you have. Okay, just do a mental model of that, right? Give everybody a moment to do it. I would venture to guess that if we use the term diversity, equity, inclusion, 30, 40% of them would be kind of indifferent. 40% would be positive, 40% would not have a favorable view. Right? Is that close enough? Now use a mental model and think about all the executives you work with for clients. And I'll bet you that close to 100% of those executives want more and better employee engagement. And so what we had to do and have to do in the sea of a storm of misinformation is we had to tell a different story versus clinging to a story that was being sabotaged, that was being misunderstood, that wasn't landing right. And so our team got together and literally I had one or two comments. And the beautiful thing about my success in business is I'm very, very good at finding, recruiting, and retaining amazing people. And you'll meet several of them today. I was talking to some folks about me being a public speaker and the different things I do. And Melanie Sanders, who's sitting in the back, will remember all of the different things she had to help me unlearn. All of Melanie's favorite thing when we would do videos, Don, that was amazing. Let's do that again. Don, oh my gosh. That one's a keep, like, Don, just for backup, let's just do that one more time. Don, if you could just shift and say with an inflection point, and 15 iterations later, she's like, I think you got it. And all of the correction communication was done with a smile, with style, firm but gracious. But Mel is one of the ones that has helped me become more of an effective communicator in front of the camera. Why did that matter? Why does that matter to executives that you all are working with? Because communication is omnichannel. It's social media. It is in public. It is your Zoom background. It is all the things. And you need to have people in place that are going to help you move in a measurable way in those solid areas. But this is how we are now telling a DEI story, but we're telling it through team outcomes that all executives want: better collaboration, better productivity, more innovation, better retention. Every cell in this methodology is a point of common ground. And by doing that, now we created conversational momentum in everything that we're doing. And again, this isn't a diversity, equity, inclusion talk. This is a storytelling talk. But I'm using what I do for a living and the challenges that we're facing and what we're doing for a living to share with you the impact of altering, improving, growing a story that allows you to have more positive business moving conversations in the right direction. How strategic storytelling can grow your business. We all have so many slices and flavors to us. None of us are like the stereotypes depicted in different things. And we all know how it feels to be misjudged, misrepresented, thought less of. We have a responsibility as storytellers and marketers and communicators to make sure that our messages reach the most audiences, but are authentic and thoughtful. And it's a real responsibility. And sometimes you have to look at things with clients with a different lens, and you've got to communicate some disagreements professionally to help people get into the right lane, so to speak, into the proper lane in communication. But as we determine our approach of what to communicate and different things, and we're all very accustomed to all the different channels. But what my charter is today, and to communicate to you all, is the type of thoughtfulness and the human-centered marketing approach to each of those channels. We talked through some of those. This is the last point on this, and then we'll start kind of winding it down. The imagery that we use and select matters. None of us are any one thing. And so when you're looking at imagery on your website, imagery and videos and different things, make sure that those images are as inclusive and as broad as possible when you're thinking about these topics. And again, when you don't have experience in a particular group or community or different things, it's not finding fault with you for what you don't know. It's really being insanely curious, right? And asking the question, right? Just simply learning from today is, who vetted the images that are going to be on client X's website? And then just listen for that answer. Saying, you know what? We probably need a second opinion, right? It'll take a couple of hours with a partner that we have that's focused in multicultural marketing. So it won't really change the budget or expense level literally at all. But let's just get a second set of eyes on this press release, this video that we're doing, the script that we're doing, so that we put the best foot forward in terms of the image we're selecting, the content, the language, the things of that nature. The gentleman that used that phrase, Indian giver, by all accounts, everything I know about him in 20-year friendship and partnership, he said, Don, I was raised in Eastern North Carolina, and that's how we talk. And I didn't see how my language laziness could hurt someone until I saw the look on your eyes in that meeting. So I'm going to do better. And that was the conversation we had after the meeting. And it works for me because I'm not like the language police. I'm not anybody's police, or I'm not anybody's judge. I'm trying to create a better workplace for as many people as possible in the time that I'm here. And in doing that, you can either make enemies or friends. And so the way you give feedback shows that. I'll give an example. So I was in a meeting and I used a non-inclusive term, which I am apt to do. I am not a model of perfection. I'm a model of continuous improvement. That's where I can hang with most anyone. The perfection game, I'll lose a lot. Continuous improvement, I'll sign up for that with most because I'm just trying to get better. There was a person in the room that gave me feedback on that, but they gave it to me with a little bit of rhythm. You shouldn't say it like that. It's just highly offensive, right? And I was like, okay, I will change the way I said it. I apologize. I said, can I give you some feedback? And they were like, okay, but I didn't do anything wrong. I said, I didn't say anything wrong. I said, can I give you some feedback? And they was like, well, sure. And I said, I'm in the DEI business. I'm a leader in business, and I'm very, very self-assured. So anything you say to me in any way is not going to move the needle. I'm good. But if you correct someone that's on the fence about who you are, what you do, and the mission you're trying to advocate, with the tempo that you did with me, you're going to push someone back when you need everybody on board to help row this boat in the right direction. So the way you communicate is as important as what you communicate. And that was the point I was trying to make to that individual in that moment. With me, do it how you want. I'm good. Like I promise. But everybody's not like that. And I've talked to a significant number of executives that say, I'd rather stay silent than say the wrong thing and it become an issue within my organization, blah, blah, blah. So we have to, Susie Silver is in the room. She's one of our senior consultants. And I learned from all of our team members who are just amazing, right? And you have to practice without penalty. You remember you taught me that, Susie? You have to give people the space to practice without penalty. And that's something as we're learning and growing and changing and learning communication, we still have to give people that space so that they continue to want to improve, that they continue to want to hear your story. Talk about Bud Light. I won't belabor that. But this is now in terms of how you respond to different things. And so I'm going to read part of this. And this is a Pride post that a corporation made. And then the responses on the right were, we disagree, right? We don't think this makes sense, XYZ. This is so unnecessary, right? Like, I don't want to hear all this woke stuff. That was kind of one of the responses they got. But the way they responded back, the corporation, was super cool. We kindly disagree with it. We think inclusion is super important to our mission as a company. They didn't belittle the person's comment, right? They just said, we disagree, and this is why we're doing what we're doing. There's another comment, I love this support of Pride Month, right? Maybe the religious right should stop even coming to our ski slopes. Again, this company's got it right. Whoa, 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 whoa. We are a for-profit business. Inclusion means all. Now, that's not exactly what they said, but that was the tone of it. So as we're telling stories, as we're growing, as we're learning to be better communicators, the takeaway is we have to get good with managing healthy tension and doing so above the fray so that we can keep moving the conversations forward in a powerful way. One of the things as a storyteller and a communicator is that authenticity is more important than the exact wording or exact platform. And sometimes we over-engineer, over-program things. So with some of your clients, an iPhone and an authentic client testimonial is as valuable as a $100,000 video shoot. A lot of times as communicators, we let the cost and the quality at a high level of what we're delivering allow us to lose speed and momentum in getting our stories out with pace. So what I would like, in the final thought I would tell you as a storyteller is look at all the different mediums that are available to you and understand the difference between the quality that you're looking for, the volume of stories you want to tell, right? And the impact that you're trying to make. And that will help you select the tools and the tempo of which to do it. Because I've seen a lot of folks that, they'll come in and when with WalkWest or digital agency and different things, and they'll say, we want to do this for this budget. And I'm like, well, man, you need a social media spread with this budget, like a lot cheaper, right? And it's really a function of how do you guide people to the right destination? And as marketers, we all know this. If you're trying to get every nickel of every dollar from each project, that's not a long-term relationship with your client. If you're trying to build them a story arc that can grow through any kind of economics times with that, then you'll give them good advice on spend at each step of the way. Because you know that the bigger, me shrinking a project short-term has always netted a larger project long-term. Because people appreciate the truth, the honesty, the focus, and what they should do with the very precious dollars that you have. Thank you. Thank you for joining us on High Octane Leadership with Donald Thompson. Today's episode is a step in our collective journey towards leadership excellence. Remember, every story we share and every insight we gain is a piece in the puzzle of our leadership journey. For more insight and detail, hit the subscribe button so that we can stay connected. For deeper information and more episodes, go to donaldthompson.com. Continue to lead with vision and purpose, and until we meet again, embrace your role as a high-octane leader in the ever-evolving world of business.